Hi, Podheads. Welcome back to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. I'm Kylie Colwell,
This is Kate Carter.
And I'm Holly Spear.
and I'm sure you all know and our listeners know who John Wayne Gacy is. But do you know the story of the guy who inspired him?
Oh,
I do not.
I don't think I do either.
You're going to learn today, guys.
We gonna learn today.
On August 8th, 1973, police officers in Pasadena, Texas were dispatched to 2020 Lamar Drive. At 8:24 a.m., they got a call from the voice of a young male who just said, quote, "Y'all better come here right now. I just killed a man," end quote. When the first officer arrived at the house a few minutes later, he quickly spotted three teens sitting on the curb, one female and two males. A few feet away from them on the driveway was a pistol. Officers entered the house to find the nude body of 33-year-old Dean Corll slumped against the wall in the hallway with several obvious gunshot wounds. The male who called and confessed to killing Dean was quickly arrested, but once questioned, investigators realized there was way more to this. And this is the story of Dean Corll, aka the Candyman, who at the time was considered the most prolific serial killer in American history.
Hey man sounds familiar.
I was gonna say it sounds a little familiar, but I'm also completely in shock right now because I'm a serial killer lover. So the fact I don't know this, maybe I do know this. I don't know. I'm excited.
Once you hear it, it may ring some bells,
Hmm.
but he definitely doesn't get the true crime media content love like Gacy and Dahmer.
Okay.
Hmm.
As he should.
True. So usually I would start these episodes out with the killer's early life, trying to make sense of all their tragedies and what went wrong, but Dean's early life was pretty normal. He was said to be shy. He didn't really hang out with other kids his age, but he was known to be super serious and sensitive. He really didn't have any childhood trauma. His parents did divorce when he was young. They later reconciled and got remarried and then divorced again 3 years later. And that's really about it. Dean's mom later remarried a man named John West, and the two started a small candy company out of their garage. Dean and his younger brother Stanley would help out with packing and sorting the candy. Mom Mary came up with the recipes, and John would sell the candy on his routes as a traveling clock salesman. The candy company started to pick up some steam, and the whole family was all hands on deck for it. Dean would go to high school, make good grades. He had a social life and even dated a bit, and then he'd come home and work. After his high school graduation, the family business was large enough to move into their own storefront. A few years later, Dean moved into a little apartment above the shop and became the official vice president of the company. And this is where things started to get a little sketchy, where the red flags start to pop up. In 1963, one of the male teen employees complained to Dean's mom that Dean had been making inappropriate sexual advances toward him. Instead of even bringing it up to Dean, questioning him whatsoever, his mom, Mary, just fired the boy. A little after this, Dean was drafted into the US Army, and this is where he allegedly told friends that he realized he was gay. He didn't last long in the military, and he was granted a hardship discharge, which he had applied for, saying he had to help the family business. When he returned, the candy company was moved to a new location directly across the street from Helms Elementary School in the Houston suburb of Houston Heights. Dean would stand outside the shop and hand out candy to the kids going to and coming from the school, earning him the nickname the Candy Man. To most kids, Dean was just that, the nice guy who handed out free candy, but to others, Dean was a bit more. He would invite teen boys over to the shop after it was closed. They would play pool, he'd show them cool music, he'd buy them alcohol and share his weed. So the Coral Candy Company was becoming this like little speakeasy for teen boys in the neighborhood. And that was up until 1968 when Dean's mom, Mary, decided to close the company, divorce John, move to Colorado, and start a new candy company there. And little fun fact, once his mom left with his sister from her second marriage, Dean never saw his mom or sister again. They just pieced out.
And just left him?
Yep.
No contact.
They would talk on the phone occasionally, but never saw each other in person.
I always find it so interesting when these people have no real bad background, like no terrible family problems growing up, you know?
Yeah, no abusive dad, no sexual abuse.
Yeah.
That's usually what we hear. So after this, Dean was forced to pretty quickly figure out his life. He had banked on running this company forever, and also using the company to find young boys to hang out with. Luckily for him, and not so luckily for everyone else, Dean had built up a roster of boys he had befriended, and his favorite was David Brooks. David was 12 and a sixth grader when he first started hanging out with Dean at the shop. It started out as normal as a grown man hanging out with a 12-year-old could be, playing pool and whatnot, but the relationship started to change. Dean would take David on trips to the beach. He would give him money to buy food and toys. And then in 1969, Dean started to pay David to be able to perform oral sex on him. Dean wasn't just molesting boys, and he had grown to start murdering them. And this brings us to the first known victim, 18-year-old Jeffrey Conan, in September of 1970. Jeffrey was a freshman at the University of Texas and had been hitchhiking with another student back to his parents' house in Houston when Dean offered him a ride. Instead of taking him home, Dean took Jeffrey back to his apartment. Jeffrey's nude and bound body would be found 3 years later, buried, wrapped in plastic, covered in lime, with a cloth gag in his mouth. What went down at Dean's apartment is unknown, but we do know that Jeffrey Conan's cause of death was asphyxiation by manual strangulation. It's a tongue twister. Sometime after this, David Brooks walked into Dean's apartment and witnessed Dean sexually assaulting 2 teen boys who Dean had tied up to his 4-poster bed. In exchange for his silence, Dean bought David a green Corvette. He also made David an offer. For every teen boy that David could lure to the apartment, Dean would pay him $200. He explained that he was a part of this organization in Dallas that bought and sold boys into slavery. They weren't being killed, or so he said. And David agreed to this. He wasn't going to snitch, and he was going to start helping Dean get boys, and thus started this partnership. On December 13th, Dean lured James Glass and Danny Yates, both 14, from a religious rally in the neighborhood to his apartment. James was known to both Dean and David and had been one of the boys who would frequent the candy shop after hours. The 2 boys were asked if they wanted to come party again, and they said yes. But instead, both were restrained to Dean's bed with rope and handcuffs. Both boys were then raped and strangled to death. David then helped Dean bury the bodies in a boat shed that he had started renting a few weeks prior, with the sole intention of burying bodies inside and storing keepsakes. So the boat shed comes up quite a bit. Just to paint a picture, imagine just like a very large storage unit. Tall metal walls, there's a bunch of units side by side, but there's no like floor, no concrete, it's just dirt.
That's terrifying.
Yep. Less than a month later, another pair of boys were buried in the boat shed, brothers Donald and Jerry Waldrop. The brothers were walking home when Dean offered them a ride in his van. David was in the passenger seat, and he helped lower them in. Like before, and like many more to come, the boys were taken back to Dean's, raped, strangled, and buried in the boat shed. In March of 1971, 15-year-old Randall Harvey was offered the same ride. Randall, after being raped, was killed with a single gunshot wound to the head. And in May, another duo was abducted. David Hillegeist, who was 13, and Gregory Winkle, who was 16. Later, 17-year-old David Falcon disappeared from outside of his family's apartment. Only portions of his body have been recovered from the boat shed. A month later, David Brooks persuaded 17-year-old Reuben Haney to come to a party at Dean's. Like the others, Reuben had been strangled and buried in the boat shed. For brevity purposes, I just keep saying like they're taking the boys back to Dean's. But after almost every single murder, Dean is moving into a new apartment or a new house. So I don't know if it's like intentional. He's trying not to raise alarm, so he's moving to like different places. But all these places, all the apartments that he rents, and all the boys, they're all in the same neighborhood, Houston Heights. So it doesn't make total sense.
Right. It's like he's being smart, but he's not being smart.
Exactly. Another boy from the neighborhood was Elmer Wayne Henley, someone David knew from junior high school. David ran into him again in the winter of 71 and lured him to Dean's. But instead of making Elmer another victim, Dean decided that Elmer would make a great second accomplice. If David can get, X amount of boys over, Elmer could double this. So Dean made Elmer the same offer, $200 per boy for this Dallas human trafficking ring. But Elmer declined. But then Elmer keeps hanging out with Dean and David and grew closer to them. And what's even more weird is that Elmer was really good friends with David Hillegeist, the seventh victim, and had even helped to pass out missing posters for him.
This is crazy.
So I can only imagine Dean also started to groom Elmer, giving him money, taking him on trips, because Elmer said he started to view Dean as an older brother. And within a few months, Elmer finally agreed to help them. According to Elmer, sometime in February or March of 1972, he lured a young boy to the house with the promise of smoking weed together. Elmer said he then handcuffed himself, unlocked it with a hidden key, and duped the boy into doing the same thing. Once the boy was handcuffed, Dean bound and gagged him. Again, according to Elmer, he says he left the apartment and he assumed the boy had been sold into a trafficking ring, and he doesn't know what happened to him, and this unknown victim remains that unknown. We don't know his identity or if his body has been recovered.
But to just be like, oh, I assume he went into human trafficking.
Yeah, that's no biggie.
No
That's
biggie.
totally fine.
Actually, that's better for them.
Oh no, I think I'd rather be murdered.
Yeah, I think so too.
Elmer then lured 18-year-old Frank Aguirre to Dean's apartment, saying they were going to go drink and smoke. And while they were doing this, Dean pounced onto Frank, handcuffed, and gagged him. Elmer witnessed all of this and in the moment realized there is no trafficking ring in Dallas. Oh shit, Dean is actually killing all of these boys. He tried to persuade Dean to not rape or kill Frank, but was unsuccessful. Later, Elmer and David helped Dean bury the body at High Island Beach, an hour and a half outside the city. Elmer and David then helped Dean lure and torture Mark Scott, who was 17. Mark fought back against the abuse for hours, even trying to stab Dean with a knife that was being used on him. Dean burned him with incense cones, and Elmer shot him with a pellet gun. At some point, Mark gave up, and Dean raped him for a second time. Mark Scott was then strangled and buried at High Island Beach.
This is horrific. Like torturing and then raping and then killing and
Several times.
multiple times. And there's multiple people there.
And Elmer, after this torture of Mark Scott, he got really into it. So when the trio abducted Billy Balch and Johnny DeLome, Elmer strangled Billy and shot Johnny in the forehead after Dean finished raping them.
Good Lord. I'm just surprised there's so many people involved.
So Johnny actually survived the first gunshot with the bullet exiting through his ear, and he started to plead to Elmer to let him go and to not kill him. So instead, Elmer strangled him to death. Like before, the trio buried the bodies at High Island Beach. So while Elmer was becoming more evil, David seemed to have a moment of clarity. 19-year-old William Ridinger was lured to the house where Dean had a new tactic. He made what has been deemed as the torture board. I sent you guys a picture of it, but it's basically a sheet of plywood, and on the four corners, he drilled rings into it so that the hands and feet can be handcuffed to the rings or tied up with rope, and the victim is bound to the board.
Wow. This might be one of the most disturbing we've done.
I should have given a trigger warning.
Trigger warning.
So William was restrained to this board, tortured, and abused for 3 days straight. Somehow, someway, David was able to persuade Dean to not kill William, and he was actually let go. The next time David walked into Dean's apartment, though, Elmer knocked him unconscious. David woke up tied to Dean's bed and was raped repeatedly. But David continued to help Elmer and Dean. In the summer of 1972, 17-year-old Stephen Sickman was bludgeoned in the chest, strangled, and buried in the boat shed. 19-year-old Roy Button was abducted, gagged, shot twice in the head, and also buried in the boat shed. David then lured Wally Semino and Richard Hembry to the apartment. Before both were strangled, Wally was forced to call his mom. She only heard him shout "Mama" before the line went dead. The two were buried in the same grave as James Glass and Danny Yates in the shed. In November, 18-year-old Willard Branch disappeared after a hike. His gagged body was found in the shed. Richard Kepner, who was 19, disappeared on the way to a phone booth. His body was found buried at High Island Beach. Joseph Lyles was 17 when he was murdered by the trio in January of 1973. And not fun fact, Joseph grew up on the same street as David, and they knew each other their entire lives. So these boys are abducting like their actual friends, classmates, people they knew their entire lives.
I'm sure you'll get to this, but what's the investigation going on at this point? Is there any?
Nope.
Okay.
So after the murder of Joseph Lyles, Dean moved once again, and then there was this odd pause in the murders. So we know of no victims from February 1st to June 4th, 1973. At this time, Elmer actually moved to Florida, and then he came back to Texas, but to a different town. And what he said was an attempt to distance himself from Dean. But medical records also showed that around this time, Dean had hydrocele, which is a medical condition that basically translates to he has fluid in his balls. So I don't know if it's the balls situation or Elmer's gone, but Dean apparently is not doing anything during these couple months. Unfortunately, Elmer decides to come back and Dean gets right back to it. He moved into the infamous house on 2020 Lamar Drive, and he also inherited the family log cabin on Lake Sam Rayburn, where the next set of murders occurred. On June 4th, 1973, Dean and Elmer abducted 15-year-old William Ray Lawrence and held him at the cabin for 3 days. He was abused and tortured the entire time before being strangled and buried. 2 weeks later, 20-year-old Raymond Blackburn met the same fate. In July, Elmer lured a new friend he met from a driving school he was attending. Homer Garcia, who was 15, called his mom to say he was spending the night with a friend. Elmer ended up being shot and left to bleed to death in Dean's bathtub before being buried at the lake. A few days later, 17-year-old John Sellers was shot and buried at Highland Beach. If you notice, David Brooks was not a part of these murders because he actually ended up leaving the little arrangement. Apparently, this whole time, he had a girlfriend turned fiance, and when he found out she was pregnant, David was like, okay, I'm going to stop abducting and murdering little boys. I'm going to be an upstanding citizen.
Love that for the fiance and the baby.
I feel like one doesn't just do all of that and decide to go straight.
No, not at all.
Homer and Dean keep at it, though, and abducted and strangled 15-year-old Michael Balch. And Michael was actually the brother of another victim, Billy Balch, who was killed a year prior.
Can you imagine that family?
Dude, Kylie, this is wild.
A few days later, Charles Cobble and Marty Ray Jones were abducted and held at Dean's against their will for 2 days. While there, the two were forced to fight each other for Elmer and Dean's enjoyment, being told that whoever won the fight would get to go home free.
Let me guess, neither of them did.
Nope. After the fight, Marty was tied to the torture board and forced to watch Charles be raped and shot to death. Marty was then raped and strangled. And Elmer buried both of their bodies by himself in the shed. And then, plot twist, David Brooks comes back. And he brought a little 13-year-old James Straymola with him to Dean's apartment.
Saw that one coming.
Wow.
James was tied to the torture board, raped, and then strangled with a cord. According to David, the only reason he came back to this arrangement was because he needed money for his new family.
Yeah, right.
Yes, that was. And he brought a little boy with him.
A 13-year-old little boy. Yep.
And you were doing this before you even had a family. Now it's just all about money. Okay.
Get a job.
Yeah. There's different options.
So James Straymola ended up actually being the last victim to be murdered. Which brings us to the final confrontation, August 8th, 1973. That night, Elmer invited 20-year-old Timothy Curley over to Dean's house on Lamar Drive to party a bit. The two drank and sniffed paint fumes while Dean just kind of hung out and watched. And I think at this point, Timothy wasn't intended to be a victim because he and Elmer actually left the house around midnight and were going back home. So they drove back to Houston Heights, parked, and then they heard screaming. And the screams were coming from 15-year-old Rhonda Williams, who had just been beaten by her drunk dad. So Elmer, trying to be nice, I guess, invited her to come to Dean's for the night to get away. So all three got back into Timothy's car and arrived at Dean's house at 3 a.m. And this is when things took a turn. Dean was absolutely pissed off that Elmer brought a girl to the house.
Staying into that.
Not at all. He kept going on and on about how Elmer ruined everything. Elmer tried to reason with him. He explained the situation. The girl was being beat. She just needs to get away for a bit. They'll be gone in the morning. And Dean seemed to calm down, and he just watched the three drink and smoke before going to bed. 2 hours later, Elmer woke up to Dean snapping handcuffs on him. His mouth had been taped shut and his ankles tied together with nylon rope. He looked over and he saw that Timothy and Rhonda were also bound and gagged on the floor and that Timothy was also naked. Dean started screaming again, saying things like, quote, "Man, you blew it, bringing that girl, and I'm going to kill you all, but first I'm going to have my fun," end quote. He then lifted Elmer up off the floor and dragged him to the kitchen with a .22 pistol pointed at his stomach. Over the course of 30 minutes, Elmer pled for his life. He said he would help Dean in the torture and murder of Timothy and Rhonda. And it took some time, but Dean ultimately agreed and untied Elmer. Then, one by one, Dean carried Timothy and Rhonda to his room and tied them up to his torture boards, followed by turning on the radio to the maximum volume so no one would hear their screams. And while he's doing this, mind you, Elmer is just standing in the corner sniffing paint.
Oh,
Mhm.
just having fun.
He's trying to disassociate, which I get. But Dean sees this and he hands Elmer a hunting knife and tells him to cut off Rhonda's clothes, giving him the game plan. And the game plan was that Dean would rape Timothy and Elmer would rape Rhonda. So Dean starts with his plan. Meanwhile, Rhonda kept asking Elmer if this was for real. Elmer responded yes, and Rhonda then asked him, quote, "Well, are you going to do anything about it?" End quote. Elmer halted in his tracks, stepped back, and then began to pace around the room while still sniffing paint. He asked Dean if he could take Rhonda to a different room. Dean didn't respond. So, Elmer grabbed Dean's pistol off of his nightstand and pointed it right at him, shouting, quote, "You've gone far enough, Dean, and I can't go on any longer. I can't have you kill all of my friends." End quote. So to this, Dean just responded with taunts, saying to go ahead and kill him. Elmer wouldn't do it. But he did. Elmer shot Dean in the forehead. And unfortunately, the bullet failed to penetrate Dean's thick ass skull. It just kind of bounced off, and he started to lunge at Elmer.
How does it just bounce off your skull? That's crazy.
I wish I knew.
Something's wrong with these people.
Elmer fired 2 more rounds, with one hitting Dean's left shoulder and the other going through his lung and lodging into the spine. Dean started to cough up blood and tried to run out of the room, but he tripped on a loose telephone wire and fell into the wall in the hallway. While down on the ground, Elmer shot him 3 more times. And finally, Dean Corll was dead. Elmer then ran to untie Timothy and Rhonda, and the 3 got dressed, pacing around, trying to figure out what to do. Elmer told them to just leave. He would deal with it. And Timothy was like, hell no, you need to call the police. And that's when Elmer finally made the call at 8:24 a.m. So as the 3 made their way outside to wait for the police, Elmer allegedly said to Timothy that he, quote, had done that 4 or 5 times, and if you wasn't my friend, I could have gotten $200 for you, end quote. Upon the discovery of Dean's body, Elmer Henley was arrested and placed into the back of the patrol car, shouting, quote, "I don't care who knows about it, I have to get it off my chest," end quote. When officers brought Elmer into the station, they were just dealing with the death of Dean. They had no idea about any of the other murders. And Timothy and Rhonda backed up Elmer's self-defense story and told officers what Dean had done to them. And then Elmer, when telling his side of the story, slipped up and said Dean was shouting about killing other boys. And the cops were like, "Wait, what? What other boys?" So then Elmer confessed to everything. Dean hired him and David to abduct boys for that Dallas sex ring for $200. But he later realized Dean was killing them, and they joined in. Elmer confessed to the torture and murder of, quote, 6 or 8 victims. He wasn't entirely sure.
6 or 8. Okay.
The police were still like, wait, what the fuck? Which I get is a crazy thing to hear, but mind you, there's about 30 missing boys from that same neighborhood, and they didn't believe Elmer's story until he started dropping names.
Why? That's just crazy.
Bad police work, I guess.
Terribly bad.
So they go back to the house on Lamar Drive, and they see that the floor of the main bedroom was covered in thick plastic sheets. Inside were the plywood torture boards with handcuffs and ropes already attached. There was the radio that was rigged to be even louder, an electric motor with loose wires that could be used to electrocute someone, 8 pairs of handcuffs, a large number of dildos, thin glass tubes, and a bunch of rope. The windows in Dean's van were covered up. Inside, the beige rug was covered in dark stains. The pegboard walls were customized with rings and hooks. And there was also a wooden crate with drilled air holes large enough to fit a person.
Oh my gosh, that's like my biggest nightmare.
It's like something out of fucking Saw.
Yeah, this is a torture chamber is what that is.
A second wooden crate was found in the backyard, and this one had clumps of human hair inside. So they have all the physical evidence. No bodies have yet, but they're like, okay, we need to talk to David Brooks. And he comes in that evening with his dad and he denies everything. No clue about any of this.
Of course.
But then Elmer wrote down his statement and detailed all of David's involvement as well. And then David finally confessed, saying witnessing and participating in the murders, quote, didn't bother him. So, with the help of both Elmer and David, investigators headed out to find all of these victims. They started with the boat shed and they got right to it. Literally the same day that Dean died, they had prisoners actually come in and dig up the boat shed. So, inside the shed was a stolen Camaro, a child's bike, an iron drum, water containers, sacks of lime, shovels, rakes, and a large bag of teen boys' clothing. They started to dig into the dirt and quickly found the body of a blond boy lying on his side. The boy was wrapped up in clear plastic, covered in a layer of lime. By 11:55 p.m., 8 bodies had been found. The search was paused for the night and resumed the next morning, leading to the discovery of 9 more bodies. Also found were 4 separate arm bones that didn't belong to any of the victims. So in total, there were 17 bodies in the boat shed, plus the arms. Next to search was Lake Sam Rayburn, where 4 bodies were found in 2 separate graves filled with lime. At Highland Beach, David and Elmer led police to more graves, with 6 victims recovered. And at this point, 27 bodies had been found. Autopsies were done on each of the victims, and their injuries and causes of death varied. Some had been shot, some had been strangled, with some of those still having rope around their necks. For their injuries, which I think might be the hardest part to hear, a lot of the victims had their pubic hair plucked out and their genitals chewed on. Objects were found in their rectums, and the most chilling for me at least was that the medical examiner found these small glass rods in the victims' urethras that had been smashed once inserted.
They were sexually tortured.
We're gonna have to put a trigger warning in the beginning of this.
The 12th victim found in the boat shed also had his genitals removed and placed into a plastic bag that was found beside him. Due to the state of decomposition and the lack of being able to use DNA in the 70s, it took quite a while to identify each of these bodies. And only by May 1974, 21 had been positively identified. Once the news of all this getting out, it was pure chaos. 27 bodies found, the revelation that there was a serial killer in town, plus the serial killer had 2 kid accomplices. And it wasn't just shock, though. Everyone was furious because every single one of those boys was reported as missing by their families, and the Houston Police Department listed every single one of them as a runaway and did 0 investigating.
How many do you know a roundabout of how many there are right now, like reported?
It was 40 reported missing in that time period.
Yeah.
Like, you don't, like, okay, 1, 2, maybe 3 from the same neighborhood. I think I'm going to get suspicious.
Yeah, honestly, that's not even just like not doing your job, that's willfully ignoring it.
Purposely. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have victims that are brothers, and the families are calling the police like, hey, 1, they had no reason to run away. 2, they had no means to. They don't have money, they have nowhere to go. It's been a year, 2 years, 3 years by now, nothing. And the police department didn't think it was odd whatsoever. But even more infuriating is that they actually had a tip called in about Dean in 1971, 2 years before his death.
Let me guess. They didn't do anything.
In 1971, Everett Waldrop, who is the father of victims Donald and Jerry, called the police to tell them that someone had told him that they saw Dean burying what appeared to be bodies in his rented boat shed.
I'm sorry. They literally said he's burying bodies.
In the boat shed.
Huh, and we have all these missing people. I don't understand what's going on.
Nope. So the police department did go out to the boat shed. They looked around outside of it, didn't go inside, didn't talk to Dean, and then they dismissed the tip as a hoax.
Mm.
If they had gone inside and discovered literally anything at that point, there would have only been 5 victims found inside there. Instead, we're at 27. And the only people left who can be charged with anything to do with this are Elmer Henley and David Brooks, which brings us to their trials. After a grand jury was held in August of 1973, Elmer was charged with 6 counts of murder and David was charged with 4. Elmer was not charged with the death of Dean Corll as it was ruled self-defense. Both of the boys declined a plea deal for life sentences and the cases went to trial. So first was Elmer's beginning on July 1st, 1974. He did not take the stand and his defense team didn't call any witnesses or experts. It does seem like an odd thing to do, but at this point, what could they even do?
Yeah.
There's all this evidence. He confessed. He has this written out statement that was allowed in. So the jury deliberated for only 92 minutes and came back with a guilty conviction on every count. Elmer was sentenced to 594 years in prison, 99 years for each count. He did appeal this on the grounds that the jury was not sequestered and the media was allowed in the courtroom, and his appeal was granted. So in 1979, Elmer faced a retrial, this time in Corpus Christi. But Elmer had the exact same defense team, and they had the exact same strategy, which was to do absolutely nothing. And the jury found him guilty on all 6 counts again, and he received the same 594 years in prison. So Elmer Henley is still alive at age 69 and serving his sentence. He has been applying for parole every year since 1980, and every year these applications get denied. He is next eligible for parole in October of 2025, and I'm sure that will also be denied. So while David Brooks was charged with 4 murders, he was only brought to trial for the murder of William Lawrence, the 15-year-old who was tortured over the course of 3 days and buried at Lake Sam Rayburn. And I couldn't figure out exactly why he was only charged with 1 murder. The only thing I could figure out is that he had written out 3 different statements and they all varied on what went down. But one of them was specifically about the murder of William Lawrence. So I think that was prosecutors' safest bet. Either way, David was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. He did try to appeal this and it was dismissed in 1979. And on May 28th, 2020, David Brooks died from COVID at the age of 65 while still in prison. And the story does not end there because there are still developments and drama as to who was a victim of the Candyman. So before the trials even started, we were at 27 victims, but this was actually dwindled down to 26 after Elmer's trial. 17-year-old John Sellers was removed from the list after testimony from the medical examiner was presented. The examiner explained that John's cause of death was 4 gunshot wounds to the chest, all coming from a rifle. As far as we know, Dean only owned a pistol, and all the other victims tied to him who had been shot were done so with this one pistol. Another odd thing was that John's car was found burned to the ground in Louisiana a week after he disappeared. No other victims' cars or belongings were treated this way. Elmer and David had listed all the names of victims that they knew, and John never appeared on either of their lists. But, counterpoint, John's body was found buried on High Island Beach, only 2 miles from the other victims located there. His body was bound, just like the others, and he showed signs of being sexually assaulted. Another thing, after John's body was found, a trucker came forward to say that he remembers seeing a car stuck in the sand in that same location. The trucker said he talked to a young boy, who he identified as Elmer, and the boy declined help getting the car out. So there's an ongoing debate if John Sellers is one of the victims or not. But I'm leaning toward yes.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
In 2008, forensic anthropologist Dr. Sharon Derrick released photos of 3 unidentified victims. 2 were found in the boat shed and 1 was found buried at the lake. The same year, one of the victims from the boat shed was identified as Randall Harvey. The next year, 17-year-old Joseph Lyles was identified through DNA as another victim from the beach. It is believed that only Dean was responsible for the murder and burying of Joseph, as his name was not on either of Elmer's or David's list. And David has said at one point, Dean, quote, got one boy by himself, end quote. And then we have some mix-ups, and bodies were misidentified. Michael Balch's body wasn't properly identified until 2010. Medical examiners thought he was one of the victims in the boat shed, but Elmer was adamant that Michael had been buried at the lake. Plus, he said Michael had been strangled. The victim in the boat shed was shot in the head. So it turns out the body they originally thought was Michael was actually Roy Button. Roy's family had submitted their DNA to test, and the results were negative for every test because they actually never compared the DNA to Roy's actual body, thinking it was Michael. So big fuck up. Then we have victim Mark Scott, and this one is still a mystery. According to Elmer and David, Mark had been strangled and buried at the beach, but in 1993, Mark was identified as the 15th victim found in the boat shed. I don't know why they identified the victim as Mark, because this victim had dark hair and 2 extracted molars. Mark was blonde and never had any teeth removed. They later went back and compared Mark's mom's DNA to the body in the boat shed, and it came back as a match with 98.5% accuracy. And then later, Elmer's given an interview, and he's like, no, the body in the boat shed's not Mark Scott. So they retested the DNA, and wouldn't you know it, it wasn't Mark. It was Steven Sigmund. So I don't know how they fucked up the DNA test. But Mark Scott's body has never been located. Investigators believe that the area in which his body was buried is now submerged due to Hurricane Ike in 2008. And unless it just happens to come up, Mark Scott may never be located. The last victim to be identified was 17-year-old Donald Falcon. The 4 arm bones found in the boat shed were positively identified as his in 2014.
Gosh, it's crazy that they're still having these realizations.
Yep. And no other piece of Donald has been located, so we don't know cause of death, anything. And Donald is not considered the 29th victim, according to the police list, but most forensic anthropologists consider him to be, which makes sense. His arm bones were found in the boat shed. I feel like that's a no-brainer. And today in 2025, we still have one unidentified victim, the 16th body found in the boat shed. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, so many features cannot be made out, but we do know that the boy had dark hair and possibly had spina bifida. He was wearing red, white, and blue striped swimming trunks, cowboy boots, a leather bracelet, and a long sleeve khaki shirt with a peace symbol on it. Due to the state of decomposition and the attire, authorities believe the boy was killed either in the summer of 1971 or 1972. Dr. Sharon Derrick had been working hard to identify this victim and believes his last name may either be Harmon or French, based off missing persons report from the time period. One boy that matches this description was 15-year-old John Harmon, who was reported missing in 1971 after calling his parents to ask for money and the line cutting off. Other victims like Charles Cobble and Marty Jones were forced to do the same thing before their murders. Another possible name is Bobby French, and this one came to Dr. Derrick in a weird way. So she receives a package from an anonymous sender, opens it, and it's a photo of this unidentified victim. The package named the boy Bobby French. And they have no idea where this photo came from or who sent it. And it didn't come from Elmer or David because they're in prison. So that makes it even creepier. In 2022, NECMEC announced they were working on identifying the boy who has been deemed John Houston Doe or Swimsuit Boy. Then we have all the other possible victims that could be out there. From 1970 to 1973, a total of 42 boys vanished from that one neighborhood, Houston Heights. And to reiterate, the Houston Police Department listed all of these boys as runaways. After the police located the 26th and 27th victim at High Island Beach, they stopped searching. Not just at the beach, they stopped searching everywhere. Even more infuriating, when those last 2 victims were found, there was an extra arm bone and pelvis in their grave that didn't belong to either of them. At the boat shed, police also located a child's cranium, or piece of the skull. No other matching bones located, but no more digging. The medical examiner said the cranium likely belongs to a boy who was at most 9 or 10, so no victim we currently know of. Elmer is very adamant that there are at least 2 more bodies at the beach and 2 more in the boat shed that he knows of. We know Dean went month-long stretches with no murders, according to Elmer and David, but who's to say he wasn't committing these atrocities on his own, or before even David and Elmer were brought into this. Former employees of the candy company reported that Dean was doing a lot of digging at the shop and filling in these massive holes with concrete. He told the employees he was burying the expired candy, and they didn't question it. The shop location, the boat shed, the beach, the lake, no more searches. His house on 2020 Lamar Drive was bulldozed, but that's it. Then, in February of 2012, police did release a photo of an unknown victim, asking the public's help in identifying him. Apparently, Elmer's family found this photo and his stuff and turned it in. It's a photo of a young blonde boy handcuffed to a device on the floor. Beside him is Dean's toolbox filled with all of his torture devices. The boy has been ruled out as any known victim, or remains located thus far, and Elmer swears he doesn't know who he is. He did say that the photo must have been taken no earlier than 1972 because that's when he got the camera.
There's a lot we don't know, is how I'm feeling.
We don't know shit in this. Lastly, we do have some names of boys who are not officially listed, but likely are a victim. Norman Lamar Prater was 16 when his mom last saw him with an adult male and 2 teen boys. Norman lives in the same neighborhood as most of the victims and went to high school with Elmer. DNA excluded Norman as the unidentified victim. DNA also excluded 16-year-old Rodney Harris, who disappeared in 1973 after getting into a van outside of his family's apartment in Houston Heights. The final name is John Green, who was reported missing in December of 1972, and we don't know really anything else about John Green because all the files pertaining to his case have been lost or destroyed. The current victim list stands at 29, but we may never know how many boys died at the hands of Dean Corll and his 2 little minions, Homer, Henley, and David Brooks. Dr. Derrick and other forensic anthropologists are still working on the case 52 years later, so hopefully more families will find answers and closure. Like I said at the beginning, Dean Corll inspired John Wayne Gacy in using teen accomplices. Gacy also sought out to kill more boys than Dean, which by official standards he did, with a victim list of 33, but we may never know the true count for either. And that was the story of the Candyman, Dean Corll.
Wow. Yeah, no words. That's a nightmare.
So he was like, Dean was late 20s, early 30s, and had the 2 teenage boys working with him to do all of this stuff.
Yeah, it was all very quick.
Yeah.
That's a rough one. But I am glad to know about it.
So I feel like I've heard of the Candyman. I didn't know any of that. And I also didn't know that John Wayne Gacy, like, based off of someone else before him.
Same.
I can't believe that this isn't more of a popular case. Just like the torturing and everything. Like, that's
I almost feel like if it's too, like, maybe too much for people.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot to take on. Should we hop into overtime?
Let's do it. So the prompt for today I gave the ladies is, what do you think is a cult that's not really a cult? And my example was Disney adults.
100%.
Yes, I figured that would be an easy one, so we can dig a little deeper.
And no disrespect to these people, but some of them are in a cult and they don't know it.
And we're here to help.
The people that use essential oils for everything.
Yes.
That's a good one.
You know, like the ones that use it. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good essential oil like smell, so I understand, but like the ones that are like, you got to use it for your head, like use this one for your headache, use this one for your colon, like blah, you know, like they're in a cult.
I like to put the lavender one on when I go to sleep. That makes sense. But the people that are like, oh, if you put this one like right here on your stomach and put a towel on it, it will cleanse your liver.
Yep.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of like the Yucca app. Is that how you say it?
Oh, I don't know what that is.
It's like an app that you scan things and it tells you like a rating of it. And it's like a crunchy people thing, but it's very like, it's not essential oilsy, but it is like, I feel like that those two things
Like clean
go
products.
together. Like not everybody that does essential oils uses
Yeah.
that app, but all the people that
Yeah.
use that app use essential oil, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Kylie, next.
Jeep Wrangler owners, specifically the ones that do the ducks.
The ducks.
Good one.
That's a good one. Yeah. I'm just confused. Do these people drive around with ducks in their car to go duck other Jeeps?
Yes, they have a bag. I know several people like this.
And like they won't tell, they're like, it's a Jeep thing. And I'm like, but who started it? And how did it become a thing? You know, like
That is odd.
yeah.
CrossFit, but specifically the people that compete in CrossFit.
Thank you. So CrossFit was on my list as well.
Okay.
Mine too.
I will say I'm a CrossFitter. I do love CrossFit.
Yeah, zero disrespect.
Yeah, no, and I also had CrossFit on my list, but specify the people to now my girls who are listening to this, because I know you guys go to competitions, and that is like instead of going to Disney for the weekend, you're going to a competition every weekend.
I mean, if you're going to be in a cult, these are healthy cults to be in.
Right.
Don't get
It's a
me
drive.
wrong.
It's a drive. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's an example of a good cult.
You could mix in that in the same, because I have another one on my list that's kind of similar. I wrote Peloton.
Okay.
Okay. I have a Peloton.
I have a Peloton.
But my girls who have, and my boys who have Pelotons are addicted to Peloton.
Yeah.
Yes. Similarly, I put on my list CrossFit and now run clubs.
I was just about to say runners. Anyone. It doesn't even have to be a
Mhm.
run club, just runners in general. But
Mhm.
run clubs are, did you know that you have to pay to be in a run club?
I just found out about that this week.
I did too.
We don't have those here. We don't
I
have those.
bet you do. I bet you do. I bet Little Rock has a run club.
Maybe.
So you guys are paying to go run in public. What?
Yes.
Just run.
Just go run. Yes. So fitness groups.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Um,
Next.
K-pop,
Mm,
Yes.
especially like K-pop, like the fandoms and those dance groups.
Okay, I'll play off of that. Similarly, I have Swifties, and that's the
Yep.
highest level of cult.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm not a Swiftie, but like I appreciate the
I do too.
like the Swifties. Like I feel they're dedicated. I love a group moment.
Yep.
Maybe I love a cult. I don't know.
I
Maybe,
love a cult. I love a cult.
yeah, maybe I do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like I'm not a
I like to
Swiftie, but I
see people
appreciate
excited. I like to see the
Yeah.
bracelet.
in
I like
mass
it.
forms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kylie, next.
People that are obsessed with the show Yellowstone, especially the ones that put like the Yellowstone like logo on the back of their car or their truck.
Yeah.
Like they work at the ranch.
Yeah,
Now we can play off of that and be like Harry Potter
obviously.
cult.
Yep.
I'm
Yeah.
a Harry Potter person. I'm not putting the wizard sticker on the back of my, like the family tree, but
Yeah.
it's all like wizard symbols and shit.
You
know,
don't
like
need
I
the
just-
lightning bolt tattoo?
Nope. Didn't
Oh, okay.
the always triangle, not that's Harry
Yes.
Potter is a cult. Love it, but Yellowstone's a good one though, because that's a very
Yeah.
specific niche of people.
It is, and they
Yeah.
all have a similar demographic, which I will not say.
Yes.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. I'm gonna say a next one, an obvious one, totally off topic, but it's almost one I didn't even put on because it's like, yeah, the like marketing, hey girly pyramid schemes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, obviously we obviously get that.
I have fallen into one of those before.
I mean, it happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
Name any multi-level marketing thing. My mom's been in it. Pampered Chef,
Love it.
Avon, LuLaRoe, any
Yep.
of them. My mom
Not
has been in it.
LuLaRoe.
Yes, my mom has sold every single one of them.
Has she watched the documentary? Because that was a really good documentary.
She probably has.
It's pretty scandalous. That's a good one. Okay. My next one is mega churches.
Yes.
Now I
Yeah,
don't want to
that's-
dive too deep into it because we don't want to get into that. But as I said on my last recording, I'm talking about mega churches. So
Yeah.
mega churches, you're a part of it.
I don't know what makes a cult, but that seems more cult-like
Than
than
anything.
Yeah. Okay, Kylie.
People that are like really into Costco, like you
I
go
had
to their
Costco.
house and everything's Kirkland brand,
Yeah.
and they only talk
Mhm.
about things they got at Costco that week. Or if they bring a dish somewhere, you're like, oh, that's good. They're like, Costco. And you
They
never
have a
see
whole pantry just of like 17 toothbrushes, 58 paper towel thing,
Yeah.
like that they've stocked up on.
Ooh, play off of that. Couponers.
Couponing.
Mm-hmm. Obviously.
And it's like you never see the people ride that hard for like Sam's Club or like BJ's.
We
Yeah.
could say pub subs. Now we're a part of the pub sub group. Okay.
I would never talk shit about the pub sub club.
Amazing. My next one was Burning Man, but to play off of that EDM culture in general, like festivals, any of that. If you're a festival girl, which I've got friends who are, or boy, cult.
Yep.
No, as soon as you start calling a scarf a pashmina, I'm like, oh, she's gone.
Yep. She's gone too far.
Next on my list was the whole state of Texas.
The country of Texas. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Kylie, that's phenomenal. That's a really good one. I agree with
Everyone
that.
I've ever met from Texas
is fucking obsessed.
is obsessed.
Obsessed.
Then go back there.
Right. Right. Everyone that I know that is from Texas and fucking loves Texas doesn't live in Texas.
Go back to your failed power grid and your barbecue. I don't care.
And the hotness and just it's huge and so far away from everything. And oh my God, Texas.
Yeah.
That's a really good one.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
Okay. My last one that I have is the Ray Dunn people.
Yo, yes, they
If you
will.
don't know if Ray Dunn, if you don't know what that is, if you go into Home Goods or TJ Maxx and you see a coffee cup
Oh,
that says coffee,
yep.
or you see like a little
It's a
sign that
specific
says eat.
lettering too.
Yeah. Okay. Those people
Ray Dunn.
are more culty than you think. I will tell you that in a lot of places, there is like lines out the door at TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Target, or not, maybe not Target. Those like resell, like home
Mhm.
overstock, home decor stuff.
Mhm.
They will know exactly what day they restock. They will go there. They will wait in line and they will fight each other over a mug that says coffee. Also, if you go on eBay or you go on like an online sell place and you type in the Ray Dunn stuff, there's like collectible items. There's like collectible things and like novelty, like there's only 150 of these and they resell them. And it's like a huge, crazy thing. They collect and they resell and they stock and buy. And
I'm pretty sure I was thinking about it. I have a coffee cup. It's massive and I think it says mom on it, MOM. And I'm pretty sure it's Ray Dunn because it's the lettering and
the
everything.
little spidery
Yeah.
lettering that's all creepy, kind of.
For
Yeah.
anyone who's confused, RAEDUNN, Ray Dunn. It's a name, but it's a brand.
Yeah.
And yeah.
The more we talk, the more I realize my mom is in every single one of these cults except for
She's
Texas.
Kylie's mom
I'm
loves
shocked she's not in a Texas one too.
She has that Ray Dunn mom mug.
Does she? I'm pretty sure I do too. And it's huge.
It's okay,
Yeah.
no disrespect. I mean, you're not
Yeah.
trying to like, stand for 2 hours outside
No,
of
I think I definitely
this.
have bought one before, like when it was cool.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that's fine. It's a
Yeah.
higher level of what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
people
100%.
that grow their own vegetables, not culty. If you step it up and you start only eating those vegetables and feeding the people that live in your, live in the huts outside of your hut, then
Yeah.
it might be in a cult, you know?
Yeah.
There's a line.
Yeah, there's a line. You haven't crossed
With
it yet.
everything, there's a line.
Exactly.
Yeah. My last one that I had on my list was just Buc-ee's.
Yes.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
people who are obsessed with. I have been to Buc-ee's before, glorified Wawa. I will say I'm a Wawa girl. Like, so I just don't like you go there and it's the size of a fucking Costco. First of all,
Yeah.
it's not like their gas prices are better than any other place, but it's the size of a Costco and you walk in overwhelmed, totally overwhelmed. I don't understand.
I will say I've been to Buc-ee's numerous times, and I would be driving down the road and I will choose a Buc-ee's over a Shell or a Phillips 66 gas station every time because they have good snacks and they have good drinks and there's good
You have to know
options.
what to get though,
Yes, and I
because
do.
otherwise it's just a regular place.
But I refuse to buy the Buc-ee's merch because I think it's sacrilegious, honestly. No,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. I'll be damned if I'm gonna worship this squirrel.
Kylie, we know what to get her for her wedding gift now. Full
It's too
on Buc-ee's merch.
it's too much, I won't buy the Buc-ee's decor. I mean, my family has Buc-ee's merch, and I don't fault them. It's
Yep.
just it's personally not for me.
Doesn't fit the brand.
It's not me.
It could.
But I don't. But if people have that, I think that's great for them.
It's the people that are like obsessed with it.
It's the people that are obsessed with it. It's the people if you stop, here's the line. Here's the line. If you stop there on your way to your vacation, you're fine. If you get out of your car and Buc-ee's is your vacation, too
Yes.
far.
Yeah.
Too
Like
far.
you pinpointed it and it's a 30-minute drive off of where you were supposed to be.
Yeah.
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 Yep.
These were great, ladies. These were great.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope you have a realization of your life now. Yeah, if you're part of any of these, we still love it. And we want to know more cults. If you have any more like soft diet cults, let us know.
Yeah.
Diet cults is a great term. Let us know also if you're currently listening to this in the car on the way to Buc-ee's, or if you're lost in Buc-ee's.
Or
If you ever want to send us a gift,
Yes.
specifically Holly, it's Buc-ee's.
Boosies.
Yep.
Okay, and with that, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. You can click on some more episodes, if you want more episodes, on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, and follow us on social media. Keep up with us. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.